in terms of what we know about the North Korean leader, what we know about the country, and what we know about the recent missile tests. How concerned are you, and how concerned should countries in the surrounding area to North Korea be at the moment?
Well, I'm quite concerned, and in conversations with my South Korean and Japanese friends, their level of concern is fairly high. We are now at the point where, as we saw with that longer range test the other day, North Korea has succeeded in developing an intermediate range ballistic missile that is nuclear capable and one that can travel considerable distances. There were no evident problems with that flight of that system the other day at all. North Korea continues to make progress on a range of other short, medium, and longer range ballistic missiles. And as we discussed earlier, may be on the verge of carrying out another nuclear weapons test. They have declared themselves to be permanently a nuclear weapons state, and they have stated very clearly in writing their intention to use their nuclear weapons, excuse me, preemptively against the United States or others. The combination of all of those factors is troubling. And the steps that the United States and its allies have taken in recent years to warn North Korea away from going down this path, to strengthen our deterrence, on the part of Washington, to extend assurances to our Japanese and South Korean allies that we will defend them. All of that has been done, as it should have been. But it has not been effective in slowing or stopping the North Koreans from going down this path. And we're now at the point where we have an even more dangerous North Korea that has stated that it has an intention, if it's pressed, to use these weapons preemptively. For that reason alone, we should be concerned, particularly when North Korea is launching missiles that overfly some of its neighbors, in this case, Japan.
Given what you've just said, is there anything that the US can do?
Well, this administration, like previous administrations, is doing the right thing by assuring our allies, by carrying out military exercises with our allies to demonstrate our strength and determination and readiness, to assure the Japanese and South Koreans that we will be there to support them in the event of a crisis. We have moved strategic assets, including the USS Ronald Reagan nuclear-powered carrier and its battle group, into waters around the Korean Peninsula again. All of these things are things that we should be doing, but I don't know that any of these things will, in and of themselves, or even the whole combination of them, cause the North Koreans to stop the continued development of nuclear weapons and testing of ballistic missiles. And so I've been making the case that it's time for the United States, together with our allies, to lift our game, so to speak. We need to do more. We need to demonstrate to North Korea that its continued behavior along these lines will cause it considerably more economic and diplomatic pain. And there are things that we could do together with our allies that will do that. Of course, we don't have the Chinese and the Russians supporting us in the UN Security Council, so that is going to hurt. But at the same time, there are unilateral things that we and our allies can do. And perhaps the most interesting thing that we ought to be thinking about right now is that if a country has nuclear weapons and has threatened to use them preemptively and is overflying Japan with intermediate range ballistic missiles, perhaps we ought to give some consideration to the possibility of intercepting and destroying the next tested missile that seeks to overfly Japan, because at the end of the day, we don't know what North Korean intentions are. And so if an intermediate range ballistic missile comes flying at many times the speed of sound over your territory, there's a possibility that the launching country, in this case, North Korea, might have a sinister intent in doing that. And I think Japan and the United States would be within our rights to intercept that missile while it's over Japanese territory. That would provide an interesting disincentive to the North Koreans to launch future missiles over Japan. It's risky, but it's one of the few things that we have not tried.
So a preemptive intercept of what could be...
No, I did not use that word. Preemptive has a whole different context.
But if you don't know where it's going to land...
It would be a defensive intercept of an incoming missile.
Right,
It is heading for your territory and is over your territory. The United States and Japan both have the capability to intercept and shoot down such a missile. We have that capability in and around Japan right now. This would not involve attacking North Korea or attacking North Korean territory. It would be a purely defensive move based on the judgment that the incoming missile could very well pose a threat to Japan. I think that would be a legitimate use of defensive missile interception capabilities.
Okay, defensive missile interception capability. You said it's risky.
Yes.
In what sense?
North Korea could regard that as an act of war. I don't think by any legal definition or diplomatic definition it would be, since the missile is overflying Japan and is in Japanese airspace, and it's being taken out with defensive systems. We're not attacking physically North Korea or its territory. It would be the equivalent, for example, of intercepting a North Korean ship that wanders into Japanese territorial waters, which has been done before. Well, certainly the pace has intensified in recent weeks. Over the last year, we've seen occasional upsurges in the North Korean missile testing cycle. This is probably the most intense one that I can recall seeing in quite some time. And it's particularly troubling because of the launch that took place a bit earlier this week of an intermediate range ballistic missile, which overflew Japan and ultimately flew about 4,600 kilometers, which is a considerable distance for an intermediate range nuclear capable missile, I might add. If you were to draw a circle from North Korea and look at what falls within that circle, that means that the system that was just tested by North Korea could certainly strike anywhere on the Korean Peninsula, all of the Japanese islands, and reach as far as the US bases in Guam. And since that is a major staging area for our military, that's a matter of concern. But a number of experts have said that the system that was flown, the IRBM that was tested, probably had a range significantly longer than the 4,600 kilometers that we saw. So this is worrisome. It's an affirmation that confirmation that North Korea is continuing to make progress in the development of its nuclear capable missile delivery systems, and that these systems are increasingly sophisticated and increasingly reliable. And if you put that together with the statements coming out of North Korea a few weeks ago, in which they declared that they are now and forever going to be a nuclear weapon state. They have no intention of giving up their nuclear weapons. And most troublingly, they reserve to themselves the right to carry out preemptive nuclear strikes against their adversaries. So if you put the testing together with their stated intentions, if you put those capabilities together with their stated intentions, this is a very worrisome development for the United States, its allies, and the region in general in East Asia.
What has changed in recent years? Is it a case that the US president has changed? Because we know that we saw when Donald Trump was president, he visited North Korea. He stepped over that line. We all remember those well-documented videos and the photographs of when he met with the North Korean president. Is this a case now that negotiations, any possibility of talks with North Korea are off the table because the US president is now Joe Biden?
The North Koreans have no interest in a negotiation about the thing that the United States wants to negotiate with them, which is denuclearization. That, by just about any measure, is gone now. That's off the table now. The North Koreans, in that recent statement that I referred to, in which they asserted their status as a nuclear weapon state, reaffirmed something that many of us have been saying for quite some time, which is that there's no interest on the part of the North Koreans in denuclearization. Probably the only negotiation that the North Koreans might be interested in is an arms control dialogue with the United States. Now that the North Koreans have arrived, so to speak, as a full-fledged nuclear weapon state, and the United States, of course, already is, the North Koreans have expressed an interest over the years, including directly to me, in having a conversation. As the former North Korean foreign minister said to a gathering of us, my goodness, 10 years ago, as one nuclear weapons state with another. That was the sort of conversation the North Koreans were interested in, because it gives them something that they have long sought, which is acceptance as a nuclear power. So that's the conversation that the North Koreans may want to have, but not before they fully develop their nuclear weapons and ballistic missile capabilities. They want to come to the table with as much proven capability as possible, if there is going to be such a negotiation. I'm not advocating that negotiation, by the way. I don't think it's a good idea, but that's, I think, the North Korean goal here.
Is it your belief that North Korea is on the brink of being fully nuclear capable then?
Oh, there's no question about that. They have conducted 6 increasingly successful nuclear weapons tests, including one that seemed to be a thermonuclear weapon. They may be on the verge of carrying out a 7th test. In January of last year, the North Korean leader made clear at a party congress that he had called that North Korea was developing, these are his words, ultra-modern tactical nuclear weapons. These tactical nuclear weapons, since they are smaller in scale and in bang, if you will, than the larger nuclear weapons, require testing. And there's no indication so far that the North Koreans have been testing tactical nuclear weapons. So one of the things that I'm concerned about, and many experts are concerned about, is that the next test or tests that we see, nuclear weapons tests by North Korea, will be of tactical nuclear weapons. And so I think that's the trajectory that the North Koreans are on. They're also in the process of developing more sophisticated short and medium range missiles, multi-warhead missiles. These were all on the shopping list, if you will, that Kim Jong-un announced in January of last year. And I have no doubt that the North Koreans are working on those systems.
Just to go back to when we recall that meeting between the former US President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, did you believe that that would ever make any progress, or did you see that as simply just rhetoric and just, you know, good for the cameras?
I had zero confidence that that discussion was going to go anywhere. I was actually sitting in a coffee shop in London when I got on my my mobile phone a copy, an advance copy from a very good reporter, a copy of the communique. And when I read it, I almost literally fell off the chair. It was so short and so lacking in substance that I found that disturbing. But even more than that, much of the language in that first communique was actually North Korean language. And the list of priorities was a North Korean list of priorities. And it was very troubling to me that the American president was going to sign on to all of that. with no guarantee that the North Koreans would deliver on any of the things that they had supposedly committed to. And indeed, the entire process fell apart fairly quickly over the next several months as it became clear that the United States was not in a position to give the North Koreans what they wanted, nor was North Korea prepared to give the United States what it wanted, which was a clear path to a denuclearized North Korea. North Korea had no intention of following through on that. And in retrospect, it's even clearer now than it was to be back then.
What's it like negotiating with North Korea?
I have been talking to the North Koreans directly on and off since, my goodness, 1996, 1997. Many of those dialogues took place in North Korea. A lot of them took place in Europe. There was a time when I had some hope that we actually might convince the North Koreans to go down the path of denuclearization. Those hopes were dashed a number of years ago. It's a very difficult negotiation with the North Koreans because they are so wedded to the idea that nuclear weapons are their salvation. Nuclear weapons are, for the North Koreans, their insurance policy that guarantees the continued survival of the regime. So when you really step back and think about it, is a fundamentally weak state like North Korea going to give up the very thing that it regards as its insurance policy that guarantees the continued survival of the system? It's pretty unlikely. Countries don't tend to do things like that. And indeed, the North Koreans have not. And so a lot of frustrations along the way, a lot of agreements and understandings were reached between the United States and North Korea, all of which were ultimately violated because at the end of the day, the North Koreans were not prepared to take the steps that they told us at the negotiating table that they were prepared to take. So it's been a very frustrating experience. But because of all the failures and because of all the frustration, those of us who sat at the table with them over the years have a pretty clear picture of what is and what is not possible. And almost certainly today, what is not possible is the denuclearization of North Korea.
There still seems to be quite a lot of mystery surrounding Kim Jong-un and what we know about him and what we know in terms of the family and the dynasty, if you like. A few years ago, if I recall rightly, there were some disappearances, shall we say, or deaths of close members of his family who I understand were in the government, and it didn't really seem that that was explained. What do we know about him? And even, I don't know how possible this is to answer, but what do we know about how he thinks?
We know a lot more about Kim Jong-un as the leader of North Korea than we knew about his father or grandfather. We've had a number of meetings between the North Korean leader and the American president. We have had senior officials in the Trump administration traveling to Pyongyang and meeting with him in Pyongyang. He has been infinitely more public in his speeches and other activities in North Korea than his father ever was. His father was a rather infamous semi-recluse as a leader. So yes, there are lots of mysteries surrounding Kim Jong-un and his family and the system, but there is a lot more transparency as a result of all the contacts and communications that we've had. Just look at the letters exchanged between Trump and Kim Jong-un. Well, you know, I wouldn't bet any money on North Korea's willingness to deliver on any of the commitments he stated in those letters, but they do expose his frame of mind, his way of thinking, his concerns and priorities in very interesting ways. So we do know quite a bit about the leader. He is smart. He is highly capable. He has got an incredible level of energy when you think about it. All the things that he's managed to do in the decade or so that he's been in power. He's done more to develop North Korea's nuclear weapons and ballistic missile capability than his father and grandfather ever did. And that's just in 11 or 12 years. He is ruthless. You mentioned I think you used the word disappearance of members of the family. Well, he had one of them dragged out of a room and killed at the end of a party meeting. And other members of his family, including his half-brother, were killed. The half-brother killed, of course, at the airport in Singapore as he was about to board a plane. So there's an element of ruthlessness here. It is no accident that of the several children fathered by Kim Jong-il, he is the one that ascended to the leadership. That's because he checked all the boxes, if you will, in terms of toughness, in terms of intelligence, and in terms of ruthlessness required to run that authoritarian dictatorship.
And how much more transparent is it in terms of what we know about the country? I mean, the world at the moment is suffering from economic crisis from one country to another, in the US, here in the UK, in Europe. But what do we know about the situation in North Korea then?
Quite a bit. There still are international aid agencies operating and NGOs operating inside North Korea. There are occasional visits by European diplomats and European experts. Not too many Americans are traveling there these days, including me. The amount of information that percolates and escapes North Korea is considerably more than anything that we knew, let's say, 10 or 20 or 30 years or so ago. There has been, I think, a downturn in the level of information flow over the last 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic, because of all the restrictions that have been imposed inside North Korea. But we still have a very good picture of what's going on, thanks to the many different resources that we have, the many different organizations and agencies that come out and tell us what they are seeing, what they are observing, and what they are sensing about the overall direction of the country.